You ready for us?
Yes, ma'am.
Is the camera going?
I think so.
All right, 3, 2, 1. We'll start when you tell us.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mikala Taylor. My Unity and Diversity talk is on Lisa Delpit's The Skin That We Speak. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to the author. She is an American educationalist and author. She's also an eminent scholar and executive director of the Center for Urban Education Excellence. She very much has valid ideas. She is the recipient of the MacArthur Genius Fellowship, and she is the award-winning author for People's Children, The Skin That We Speak, and The Real Ebonics Debate. This author tends to focus on works on student access to cultural power and preparing teachers for cultural, linguistic, and ethnic diversity. Today, for my book, she focuses more on language, which is the buzzword for today. Basically, the main idea of her book is that different is not synonymous with deficient. Her book is a collaboration of many other authors and theorists that bring forth instances where teachers, students, parents even, have termed their kids as deficient because they were different through language. Will someone read this quote for me?
Yes. If schools are to be as successful at teaching standard English, they must be just as welcoming of the children, of their lives, and of the worlds that interest them.
Now, this quote may be applicable to teachers that are teaching us because we're a totally different generation. We have totally different ideas. The technology is different. Our language is different. But this also affects us when we get into the classroom because the students that we teach, although they seem like they're going to be in the same generation as us, are going to be vastly different from us. The way they talk, the slang they use, the region they're from, their cultural background, their home life, their socioeconomic status, everything is going to be vastly different. And so we need to prepare ourselves for that. And Lisa Delpit definitely does that. But first, just to show you how different it is, I'm going to bring forth Starkville Records because that's my hometown. And I hopefully will get to stay there, so it'll be applicable to me. So for the Starkville Records, there are 31,143 students in the school district, which is a ton. Among those, there are 18,919 white students. There are 10,861 Black or African American students, over 1,000 Asian students. And among those Asian students, there are different regions and different cultures. There are 4,851 that are from a different country, 1,422 that are from different states, and 99 that are from abroad. Now that's amazing, isn't it? In the small town of Starkville, there's that much diversity. And just think, if y'all were even in this small town of Starkville teaching, you would have to be in a classroom with that different array of students. Within your classroom, you could have a student from Starkville, Mississippi. You could have a student from China. And those languages are going to be vastly different. The slang they use, the terms they use, their culture, their background, totally different. But you, as a teacher, have to figure out a way to make a lesson plan that is concise, fits your school standards, but also applies to these two students. Now, how are we going to do that? Because that sounds really challenging. All right, so the NCTE standards, they've also set us up with a challenge because we also need to fit these standards as well. So a couple that deal with language. Students should adjust their use of spoken, written, and visual language to communicate effectively with a variety of audiences and for different purposes. Now, I have trouble with that, but I'm supposed to teach students how to do that. Well, that's challenging. Students must also develop an understanding of and respect for diversity and language use, patterns, and dialects across cultures, ethnic groups, geographic regions, and social roles. So not only do I have to be able to relate to diverse students, my students need to as well. So I have to be that role model for them. Students whose first language is not English make use of their first language to develop competency in the English language arts and to develop understanding of content across the curriculum. So I'm dealing with students that have English as their first language, students that don't speak formal English, the right English. I'm having to teach all these kids in a certain way that the school dictates, but I'm having to kind of fit them all into one mold. Lisa Delpit doesn't think so. This is just an example of the dialects that we have all across the U.S. And within each of these, there's a different one. Because if you look at Mississippi and Alabama, for those of us who know, we have totally different slang, totally different dialects. And so, even if you have someone from up here, North Mississippi and South Mississippi, totally different. We have totally different slang, totally different teaching methods, totally different classrooms that we've gone through. And once you have students in classrooms that combine from different regions, it's just going to create a totally different atmosphere. Right. So Lisa Delpit kind of lines up these objectives for teachers. So she suggests that we build respect through relationships, expose students to variations of English, reveal bias or stereotypes, and after all that is completed, encourage success by expanding towards standard English. Goodness. Alright, so how do we build respect through relationships? It sounds pretty easy, but it's not, because these students have a wall built up. And it's because of various other challenging aspects in their society, whether it be parents that think they're stupid, teachers that have told them they're wrong, friends that have told them you're different. So how do we do that? First of all, we need to listen, okay? I've personally gone through many instances where a teacher is just standing here talking and they're like, hey, okay, so what do you think the answer to the question is? They'll start talking about like, no, you're wrong. Next person. And how is that helping? How is that encouraging people to be the student that they can be, to be the creative, critical writer they can be? If you shut a student down, you are automatically saying, you're not good enough, you should just quit trying. And that's not what we should do. After that, you need to reveal your formal and casual registers, like Ruby Payne suggested. I need to know that my students can see that I can speak in a professional manner, so I will have valid ideas, I know what I'm talking about, so they'll form a sort of respect for me and what I'm saying. They'll be like, okay, this person knows what she's talking about. I should probably listen to her so I can know too. But I don't need to be higher than them. I need to show them that, hey, I'm one of you too. I understand what you're saying, and if I don't, I'm willing to listen and learn. So I need to reveal my casual register as well. I need to question to show interest. Like I said earlier, I'm not going to be aware of everything these children are saying, so I need to question, be like, I'm so into what you're saying. I want to know your life. I want to know everything about you, because if I want to know what you're saying, you're going to want to know what I'm saying. So if I do that, then I'll open up the boundaries just a little bit more. John Wynne suggests if we reject them by rejecting the language they grew up with, we alienate them from the very places where they could learn the standard dialect. And by teaching children that their language is inferior, we teach a lie. Now, John Wynne went to a conference with his kids. He was the teacher of a journalism class. I took journalism, so this hits home with me. I love to talk. Anybody that knows me knows I love to talk. I love to write. Anything that gets my voice heard, I love it. So with them, he took a class of African-American students to a conference, and they were sitting there, and they were so engaged with the speaker. They were like, goodness gracious, this person has so many great ideas. I want to ask him a million questions. So they were all writing down their questions, and it comes to the time of questioning. And he looks down at his students, and he's like, where's all these amazing questions y'all have gathered? And they're like, you ask. We don't want to talk. We sound funny. How upsetting is that a child with so much interest feels like they're incapable of asking a question just because they're different? Not because they're deficient, because their intelligence is right up there. They understand what this lecturer is saying. They have ideas, they have concerns, they have criticisms, and yet they don't have the voice to speak up because they're told they're wrong. And that's just upsetting. And John Wynne just focuses on his part of the book as kind of going past that and showing them that their ideas are valid. And he is very upset because society has told us that standard English is the only manner in which we're able to speak. if you don't speak standard English, if you don't fit this certain mold, if you differentiate just a little bit, you're wrong, which is not right. All right. So we need to expose students to variations of English, because standard English is not the only form of English that is correct. There are different variations. So there's our home language. That is our cultural language, anything we hear from friends, media, family, anything that affects us, our region even, just wherever we are. So Lisa Delpit says, once this respect for home language is established, I concentrate on how different forms of English are appropriate in different contexts instead of relying on right-wrong dichotomy students usually face in school. So like I was talking about earlier, how, oh, you're wrong, you're different, you're shut down. No, this is saying, okay, I understand you come from a different region, a different culture than me. I'm going to value your ideas by listening to you. But there is the standard form of English that differentiates from that. So once we respect the home language and we just value everybody's differences and recognize them as valid, we move on to formal or academic language. She says, I see no reason why students have to be convinced that the way they talk is wrong in order to master formal English grammar and speech. So once we say, okay, I understand you're speaking differently. I understand that your language is different than mine. But we can become bilingual and form this common language through formal or academic language, which is standard English. It's not going to totally erase your home language, no. It's just building off of this. This is your foundation. You can become a stronger, more critical, creative thinker that has a universal knowledge through standard English. And that's amazing. Students sometimes think if I don't fit the mold, I'm wrong. And this teaches us, hey, no, you're not wrong, but you can become a stronger speaker, stronger writer by doing this because you can affect more people that share this common language. And then once you move on from formal or academic language, then you get to professional language. Usually reaching professional language requires formal or academic language. When you walk into an interview, people have a certain expectation of standard English. Although people take it too seriously sometimes and say, okay, if you talk a different way, I don't believe that you have the intelligence to complete this profession. Although that may be wrong in some circumstances, it is a norm. So students need to be aware of that. So they take their formal or academic language, perfect that, and then move on to professional language, which is where your career comes in. You learn if you're into computers or that's your profession, then you learn the technology lingo, I guess. If you're an English teacher, you learn how to talk about literary devices, talk about literature. So that's where that comes in. And that's just kind of moving them from level 1 to level 3. But each one requires the next. Alright, so this is kind of the serious part of the lecture. Bias or stereotypes. Whether we like it or not, every single person here has a bias or stereotype. It's just a common knowledge subject. Students may think that you have a bias or stereotype just by your attitude, your actions, the way you speak, the way you act towards them. So in order for us to reveal bias and stereotypes, we must eliminate our own, which kind of sounds tricky, but we need to be a blank slate. We need to make sure that each child in here knows that everyone has a valid idea. Just because they're different, it's okay. So you examine societal stereotypes. Examine what society says about certain people. Okay, you know, I'm African American. What do they think about me? I'm from Mississippi. Do they think I'm a redneck? Just because I say y'all and have a country accent, do I not have valid ideas too? Then you examine your individual bias. And that's hard as a teacher, because just because one student talks in perfect standard English, does that mean they're your favorite? Does that mean they have more intellect than this person over here that doesn't, that gets A+ on their paper? So we have to examine our individual bias, and students must examine their own too. Teachers have the ability to mold students' opinions merely by attitudes towards certain language variations. If you're giving more attention to a person that's speaking standard English, it sounds perfect on paper, out loud, and you're showing them favor, calling on them more, saying they're right while shutting down another student,